This is one of our personal horses. He's like a 4-year-old. In the house of the blacksmith, the knives are made of wood, so he's always the one that's the last one to get done, and forgot that we owned him, right? But Kirsty said if I wanted to ride the horse, I had to shoe it, so I don't know what she meant by that. We have a horse that is fairly fetlock varus. Okay, so varus meaning there's more distance or air between our fetlocks. What caused that? What was the cause and effect? If I drew a line down the center of my radius and down the center of my cannon bone, can you see how the radius is to the medial aspect of our carpus or to the medial aspect of our cannon bone? What we have happen, if we can imagine this ruler being our cannon bone, okay? As I push down on the medial aspect, same thing as when you're bumping. If I push down on the medial aspect of that ruler, what happens to the distal end, right? The bottom end. You can see how it's going to push out. If we look here, he also has a fairly flat carpus. And when I say that, he doesn't have much rotational deviation. So the forces that we're going to see is the same as, and I'm going to use this middle finger just because it's the, anatomically it's similar, okay? So as I bear weight and I push down again on that medial aspect of my cannon bone, I'm going to push it to the lateral side. So you can see that I'm pushing laterally on the distal end of my cannon bone, which is going to create that fetlock varus conformation. If I have that same offset knee, but I then add a rotational deviation, you can see how my knuckle now wants to push the medial aspect. So the next horse we're going to see has a not quite as severe offset knee, but he is fetlock valgus, meaning closer to each other. And the reason for that is because of rotational deviation. If we were to set up a way of measuring our rotational deviation, one thing we can do is set our ruler so it's down the center line. And I'm just looking at the dorsal edge of my carpus. And I'm lining up the front edge of that carpus, dorsal edge of my carpus, with my ruler. You can see how close we are to a right-hand angle when we look at that ruler. Now, one way that we can start to see this fetlock varus really start to show up is if I bring this foot forward. As soon as I take him from non-weight bearing, can you see how that fetlock, cannon bone comes here, that fetlock really wants to go that direction. This is quite a common shoeing protocol that I do. So I just punched a couple nail holes inside of my fuller end line on my outside, and I put just a bit of a lateral extension on, and it really hides that and gives that horse a support, and you'll see those feet to start really coming around with that shoeing protocol. All right, now let's go talk about this second horse. So he's got a lot of rotational deviation. You can see how tight that ruler is. If we look here, if we had a protractor, we could actually measure the angle. Shoeing protocol. About 10% of my horses that I have on my books tend to have this problem. What are you thinking, huh? I find that these horses tend to really want to hit laterally first. And if I come in and put a side bone, I can help these horses travel a lot straighter and truer and land a lot flatter. Now, on the flip side of that, the additions that we have, what do you think, Mr. Ed here? The additions that we have, he's got a fairly shallow angle. And so the back half of that foot is just a little bit weaker. So I want to protect it. What we're going to do is we're going to reduce concussion in the back half of the foot, in the caudal aspect. We're going to go ahead, we are going to increase the angle, and we're going to disperse the weight, okay? So by increasing the angle, we're going to change the way the distal dorsal border of the coffin bone interacts with the ground. So if we take the apical angle, which is the angle of the coffin bone, there's going to be a magic angle in which we can start to really gather these feet. So the next thing we're going to do is disperse the weight. So we're going to have a heart bar, and we're going to have a pour in, and that's going to allow that digital cushion to heal. The reason digital cushions, we end up with this bit negative palmar angle, weaker back half, is the digital cushion, if you ever look at it, doesn't have much blood supply. It doesn't have a lot of innervation. So the lacking of innervation is great. I wouldn't want to feel my digital cushion if I was a horse, and I don't want to feel on my articular cartilage. Oh, yes. So the lack of innervation allows it to take quite a bit of abuse. Problem is, though, if it gets injured, it can't heal itself because it doesn't have that blood supply. So by evening the load, dispersing it with a heart bar and the pour in, and the increased angle, and reducing the concussion by where we're putting our wedge, this is a really useful shoeing protocol I found for these horses. When we have a horse that's medial lateral out of balance, where's the lowest spot and the highest spot? How do you trim that to drop one side? What I see pretty commonly is a foot, let's say this foot, for instance, is high outside. I see a lot of people start their nip on the center of the toe and then just take more and more and more and more and more all the way through the buttress. And then on the inside, they take less and less and less and less all the way through the buttress. That creates a coil or a spring. How do you ever get a coil or a spring flat? It doesn't really work that well, right? So if we compare these two shoes, we're going to consider your left-hand side as the lateral side. Do you see the biggest gap? I'm going to turn it around for you. The largest gap is actually at the widest part of the foot. And you can see I actually have a gap between my points and my heels. So when I take a nip on this foot, I'm going to take more in the center of the quarter, and then I'm going to come out at the point of my high heel, and then I'm going to take just the point of the inside heel to get this foot flat. So if we look at how this nip was, we can see how my biggest part of my nip is right there in the center of my quarter. I came out at the point of the heel, and the only spot that I touched on the medial side is just the point of this heel. It's the fastest way for me to change medial lateral balance and maintain flat. I can get way more medial lateral balance change because I conceptualize and understand that.
I need to know everything, who and the what and the where, I need everything. Trust me, I hear what you're saying, but act like it's new what you're telling me. I'm curious, George, I hop in the Porsche, 5 and a horse, I'm ready for war, I'm coming for throws, to turn to a ghost, I need to know everything.
All right, so what I'm doing is I'm just kind of doing the math, talking through everything I need to do. So width and length, so my heels are half the width of my foot, more or less. So 5, where I want to fit to is going to be 5 1/4. So 5 and 5 1/4 is 10 1/4. Normally I do 1.5 inches for a 3/4 forward. But I'm not going to bump the toe because we're building a swell heel, yeah? So we're going to thin that toe out. Okay, so I'm going to subtract a half off of that. So width and length plus 1 inch at this point. So I'm at 10 1/4, 11 1/4 is what I need for the shoe. I'm going to put 1.5 inches into it, okay, for my swell. Okay, so that's 12 3/4 for my shoe. And that's what I would need just for the shoe itself. So I always like to start with that, because then I know where to put my marks, okay? Then I would add my bar width, which is another 2.5. So I'm at 15 1/4. 15 1/4. 16 1/4. Yeah, we'll go with a pair of 16 1/4. All right, a consideration anytime I do a heart bar is you want to make sure before you apply the heart bar that they can take the frog pressure. Okay, so just come in, squeeze your frog from both directions. If they don't jump, normally they can take the frog pressure, okay? I learned that lesson the hard way more than once, so I'm not very sharp. All right, this is a project shoe. A required project shoe. The reason I always start with what I need for the foot is I can work backwards from that and come to size. Okay, so I know that I want that 12 3/4 in the straight, and I want, after I'm done bumping it and everything, I need it to be down to that 11 1/4 before I turn it. Okay, I know those things. So we're going to offset that. That foot wants a pretty heavy offset. Now from there, half of, we'll go ahead and just call it 13 for our shoe. So half of 13 is 6 1/2. We've offset that just a little bit. So I'm going to come in, put my mark at 13. And put that at the end mark. So that's what I need to make my shoe. Okay. Next thing is I need to figure out where I want to put my bumps. Okay. Where we're going to do our set down. I'm going to build the shoe all in the straight, and then I'm going to turn it, and it's a 3/4 forward at that point. Okay. So 13. I'm going to bump that down to 11 1/4. Let's move that up 1 1/4. Yeah. Yeah, you guys can build just a symmetrical shoe. Because I'm building it for a foot.
And then your marks at the end, mark those.
I'm going in. Yeah, I'm going in 1 inch and 1 1/4 inches. Okay.
And that's just for that snip, 1 1/4 from the end or 1 1/4 from the end.
So I have my 13-inch piece in the center, and from the end of my 13-inch shoe piece, 1 1/4 inches on the outside, 1 inch on the inside. So I got about 7/8 in that heat. Okay. So I quenched maybe a 1/2 inch from my mark. I really want the majority of my thickness right at that mark. So I'm not quenching to that mark. I'm quenching just beyond it. Kind of halfway between those two marks. What's that? I got about 7/8 that heat. I want to put every bit of 1 inch in it. Reason for that being is after I do my set down, I lose just a bit of what I bumped in it because it's behind my bump. So in that first heat, I don't really care about getting my thickness in it. I let it get wide, okay? My next heat, I'm going to come in, I'm going to gather it and bump it a bit more. So before I get to my bumping, I'm going to come in and I'm working to the center of that, turning the stock and my hammer at the same time. I'm working that outside edge because when I turn it, it's going to thicken that inside edge up. So you can see I have my bump thickest right there at the center of that. So I put at 1 1/8 inches in that side. Okay. What I thought was a mark was not a mark. So I quenched right, ended up going to my mark. I didn't actually see my mark. It was on the other side. Not a big deal. Don't go ahead and bump it. Get your heats right. Never hit it if your heats are wrong. I probably put quite a bit more than that in it. But you got to remember, I ran my section. So that 1.25 inches, or that 1 1/8 is after my section is brought back to width. What's that? Yep. Because really, I'm trying to build thickness. I'm not trying to build width. You see how I did almost all my drawing from that outside. I drew it up with that slight taper until it's 3/4 inch on my foot surface. You see how much thickness I've got there. Okay, 9/16 in thickness. It looks terrible. If you leave it the same thickness and you bump it, it's protruding, it just looks. Yeah, if you ever put a swell on anything and you don't rattle it down just a bit on the foot surface or the ground surface, it sticks up. It really looks bad. As far as the front half, yeah, just about 3 inches. I'm thinking about kind of where my nail pattern's going to be. All right, so bump that down to 14 1/4. And I have exactly 11 inches for what I needed for my shoe. Okay, so that's the important thing for all of these things. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter how much we have on the end. What really matters is we have enough for the foot, right? So that's why I always have my foot measurement mark. 14 1/4. Awesome. If you look, so we're just under 11/16
On the ground surface.
and right at 3/4 on the foot surface. So I'm going to go ahead and just sharpen a point into this. So one thing to help you out, hold that. I'm putting that in at the angle that my quarter is going to come in. That's my medial side. I'm going to come in with a straight cut parallel with the face of the anvil. If you ever do this, make sure you always cut about half the depth you're going to actually draw. Once I've done that, come into the corner of the anvil. Huh? Nope. That's where I wanted to center my bump. Okay, not a bad idea to go hit red head and remark where that end is. I'm imagining where I want the corner of that shoe to be, okay? Okay, so I'm thinking about the quarter I'm going to have coming in, thinking about what the corner of my bar is going to be, and I want that to be, on my apron, I want that to be about half of what I want the overall width of my bar to be. Nope, that was my medial. So I went ahead and bumped my lateral. I always like to do kind of like my lateral branch in closer to where I'm at. So I bumped my lateral, bumped my medial, did my medial. I'll do my lateral. That way I'm kind of thinking about it in the right order. I've had a ton of success with this shoe. Like a ton of success with this shoe. All right, so this time I'm going to put a little extra quarter bend on this. Because that outside has quite a bit more quarter, doesn't it? Yeah, you can overcut it is your biggest concern. If you overcut it, life sucks. So that mark isn't a drop dead point, it's just a consideration. So I'm just paying attention to where that's at. And depending on if I push or pull, so when we're measuring, we got to consider where our corners would be if this was a straight bar. Okay? So that is actually where I'm going to measure to. So I pretty well hit my mark exactly at 11 1/4. 11 1/4 is 5 5/8. I have a 1/8 inch offset. So right there, I'm 11 1/4, and the reason you want to lay it out like I just did, 11 1/4, half of that is 5 5/8. I've got just over an 1/8 inch offset, which this foot has a big inside and outside, so that's to be expected. It's actually not a terrible shoe. Being big sucks. With small, I can whip on it. I can get a lot out of that equilibrium toe. I'm good at hitting things. Again, those marks aren't drop dead points, they're reference points for me. So I'm paying attention to where they're at and making sure they're ending where I want them to be. And this is where this shoe becomes fun.
I feel like this is where all the big component shoes become fun.
Holding. I think we'll be all right. And yes, we are putting an equilibrium toe on this.
There have been Sean people.
Awesome, thank you. So just like I showed you guys just a minute ago, I came in, put that roll around that outside on the foot surface. All right, so to do the equilibrium toe, I'm gonna come in, I'm gonna knock that corner off on the foot surface. Because your hammer does more work than the anvil is why you have to do that. And then I'm gonna come in, the corners of my transition points, pulling it out to there. And I want to bring that bevel back to the inside edge.
Like right up to.
Pretty close to it, yep. Okay, once I've done that, I'm going to lift up on my stock, hit my inside edge, I'm going to come around, push that outside edge down, going to hem that up slightly.
Can we turn it and pull it?
Yeah, I don't really care how you guys fuller it. Coming just a little big, but I think we'll be okay on that. But it gives you guys an opportunity. This is a shoe at some point in your career is going to help a horse. Okay? It is going to help a horse. So that's a great opportunity for me to actually demo a applicable shoe, right? No, this was on my shoe display. There's a shoe running around in here somewhere that was my failed attempt at my shoe display shoe. I probably built less shoes for my shoe display than about anyone else that's ever taken their fellowship. I built pretty much one of everything. I built 3 patent bars, 2 of these, and 1 of everything else. So. But I had a lot of experience that allowed me to do that, right? So I got a pair of lateral extension hinds.
Not bad at all. Yeah, not as much, right?
It was a different test at the time. You had to shoe 1 foot, 1 dead foot you had to build a specimen for when he took it. Now they expect you to shoe a pair of feet. And it will be with bar shoes. That is the one thing you do know, is that it will be with bar shoes. Huh?
And you have to lateral.
Yep. Lateral extension, straight bars, set away bars because the frog was protruding. Like 16.5 inches, 381.
So you did this set down bar?
Yeah, I didn't have to do a swelled heel, but I had to,
How much time do you get?
2 hours. And he was a absolute fire-breathing dragon. I think that was a big part of how I got honors. He was like I couldn't work on the foot. I went 30 minutes on my trim, which I don't do at a comp. But I could only work on the foot for about a minute at a time. So I'd work out on it for a minute, he'd snatch, blow up. I'd walk around, work on the other foot for a minute, and I just kept going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Huh? So like when we did the trot up, there's a little scrawny guy that was he was the guy that was trotting the horse, and they took him outside the door, and he kicked up. He kicked up, like really, really high in the air, just double barreled right out, right? And then when he did the trot up, he ran off with that guy. He was one of the Army farriers. I mean, ran smooth off. And that guy was holding on for dear life because his horse is running away from him. And so when we did the trot up afterwards, they didn't ask him to trot very much. I wanted to be burning on at the hour mark was my goal. I ended up being about 15, 20 minutes behind. And then every single run I'd done, I eagle-eyed it. So just like I'm doing now, I built my shoe, like done, and burned it on for the first time, and I was big. And so I had to do a little bit of boxing and a little bit of shaping, but I made it work. I got the shoes at home. I'm pretty sure they would have given me an extra 15 minutes if I had needed it. But I didn't ask for it. I just whipped and spurred. Yeah, I think
It's gonna be.
I think I nailed both shoes on and clinched them in like 7.5 minutes. The year I watched David Rennie win the world, so the top 10 is a fast class. It's an hour to shoe a pair of feet with 3/4 fullards. Okay, it's the same one you guys seen at Kremling. But that year, you had to do mass-lot toe clips. So you're hauling. And he gets his horse back, and they were doing a blind judging thing, so the judge wouldn't see whose horse it was. And so they would take your horse from you and take it up behind this tent and then bring it back to you after the judges looked at your shoes. And he had a pair of 3/4 fullards he nailed on in 4 minutes and won the world with it. Him and his partner shoe a pile of horses. So when I say partner, his business partner. His business partner is a guy named David Bereni, or Paul Robinson. And Paul won the Champion of Champions. They brought all the world champions together and had one comp for just world champions. I was talking to his old boss, Alan Ferry was his old boss. And I guess the weekend before that, he did 4 back-to-back goes. Like 5-minute splits. Did a go, took a drink of water, did a go, took a drink of water, did a go. All right, so this is where it does get a little bit hard. Trust the project, okay? If your center punch mark is right, it will come together. And just trust that it will. All right. So you see how that came right on around. Again, remember what I said. Trust the project. Because when you're about right here, you're like, this is stupid. It's not going to come together. You guys can weld it up before you fuller it, all like however you want to fuller it when you want to fuller it.
When you were growing up, did you see these shoes that a lot of practices use?
I've never seen this shoe made by anyone but me. So this is a version of a Tennessee navicular shoe that Jim Quick, he kind of took Jim Quick and Jim Keith. They used it for navicular and it was a straight bar, but I've not seen this shoe used the way that I use it. So was your question, when I was growing up, did I see forging applicable?
Yeah,
Like-
I know. I don't know if you've ever used these competitions.
No, I've never had them at a comp, no.
Like,
I was raised by my father, right?
yeah.
So he's a fellow, has been a fellow for a long time. So you got to remember, I've seen him build patent bars inside of a one burner Whispering Baby. You know, I was raised seeing these shoes built and nailed on horses all the time. So yes. You know, where we live, we don't have when I grew up, technology wasn't where it is now, right? It's not that I'm that old, but I'm old enough. Also, where we live is kind of in the middle of nowhere, right? So having power, like I just got a grinder for the first time like 3 years ago. Everything was hot rest. Everything I ever seen Dad do was hot rest at the horse, half the time in an amble vise, right? Like, so, you know, and I seen Dad do all those things that he did all through my youth with nothing but his piece of bar stock, his hammer, and his wits, you know, and get himself out of many a situation. All right, I think that's pretty well there. For curiosity's sake, let's go see how it fits. I am. I'm just gonna weld the other one. I can live with that. Cool.
Sure. Just check it in the pond. Yeah. Can you get it in the pond?
On that note, you make these fit.
Yes.
Yeah. At this point, you make them fit. Yeah, you can cut the center out of the toe and re-weld it if you're too big. I won a convention class one time on a pair of heart bars, or on a heart bar for the specialty. It came just a little big, didn't look right, so I welded it. I cut the center out of it and welded it up. I mean, I really deserved to win that class. I had built one toe bin for the Roadster, and I had built, yeah, that was it.
Nice. That's all you need.
It was, I guess. I think I'd built a frog plate or something prior to that too, but
You don't have to practice if you have a skill set and you know how to use
I have
it.
to practice now. I am very much out of shape, out of practice. Fourth, I think. We did great. He was,
That's what rocket is. So I don't get why you cut this like this.
the landing. See how it comes in? If I put a swell all the way to the end, it's going to really have a secondary slam down. But because of this, it's going to walk in and out. So did you guys notice when I went for this heat, I tipped that frog plate down. Yeah? So by doing that, that allows me to get a heat on the tip of my frog plate.
So you don't really need to protect your corners like you would if it were a straight bar.
No. It's not a straight bar.
Yeah.
Normally they don't come out. That back edge doesn't come out square across each other like it did today.
Hypothetically, if you don't get that angle how you wanted it, you could ratchet it a little.
Exactly.
That's good to know.
Yeah, I don't spend a lot of time forging my frog plates in the center because it ruins so much more about the shoe. It's worth just rasping it in to submission. Yeah, you do such terrible things to it. So what is the point of what we're doing? This is an important question, right? So to that, why are we putting this shoe on? His foot's running forward,
Yeah.
right? That's the main reason. His foot's running off, right?
Yeah.
Like it's ran forward, it's really flary, negative plane angle, all those things together, right? So what'd be the last thing that I would want to do? Is perch it out on the tip of that, right? If I put an equilibrium toe on, what's the goal? I'm bringing breakover back, right? So if I'm bringing breakover back, I would probably want to go ahead and just set it back just a tick at the same time as. This is a really important thing. You don't really want to ever burn your frog because of the moisture content. So to prevent that, you can come in and use your ruler. It works for if you have a buttress or a really short foot as well. Just take your ruler, set it in there. And then the last thing I'll do, just one light little. There it is. Center of stock. Pretty happy. No, it's clipped. I just got to brush it, flatten it, and burn it. We hope one horse in the world, because somebody's learned something from us doing this, then all the extra time was worth it. If we inspire one person to go out and get better with any one of our videos, then all the money and time we spent on it is worth it.